Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Robinson, founder and CEO of Ceresa. Along with our friends at EduLab Capital, we have spent the last few years really thinking about how to bring truly world-class leadership development, training, mentoring, coaching to many more people in a very equitable, accessible, and affordable way. And today we're going to be talking about the top 5 trends to watch for with the future of work. Okay, the first trend is probably not a big surprise, hybrid and remote work. This is such a huge shift from where we were before, where honestly, could we even have imagined that we could now interview, socialize, train, play games, even problem solve collaboratively through these virtual formats and with all these virtual tools now available? Many of the benefits of this are so clear to us: less time commuting, less time on inefficient work things, flexibility in location. I'm here in my home office right now. You'll probably see my dog walking around somewhere behind us. Um, Lots of benefits, and a lot of the benefits really accrue to people who have a lot of family commitments, other commitments, caregiving outside of work, which tends to be a much higher proportion of women and BIPOC populations. So a really big benefit that can really attribute to those populations. I do think our understanding of the challenges that a hybrid or remote workforce poses are continuing to evolve, but something that companies have to be very focused on. If they don't get this right, the companies are not going to benefit from the same talent pool being available to them, given how much in demand it is for people to work in remote environments. Some of the problems obviously come around some of the stress that comes from not having that switch off time, transitioning between workplace and home place, some of the loss of connection from not being in person with people. I think one of the biggest concerns is the sort of social capital element. So people who are in a workplace physically are going to benefit much more from that physical proximity to leaders in terms of visibility, access to mentoring, which all translates to higher chance of promotions, etc., compared to people who are choosing to work in a remote workforce. And how do we ensure that that inequity gets addressed? Okay, so that was hybrid and remote work. Second is the continued trend in high attrition and retention issues that companies are facing. This has gone on way longer than I expected, with a recession starting to emerge. If we think about inflation, global uncertainty, war, and this impending huge recession, people were still seeing the same issue with attrition. And I think one of the reasons is it's much less about financial opportunity than it is the desire for growth, finding more meaning and joy. And so companies really have to focus on this. We know that the biggest reason people leave an opportunity now is actually for more learning and growth opportunities. So how are companies choosing to continue to invest in that, even if they're considering layoffs as part of a recession planning? You've got to invest in the people that stay. The third trend is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is now a C-level, a CEO agenda item. This is not a nice to have or something that's sidelined in a people function. With George Floyd's murder during the COVID era, something that was already gaining in, there's the dog, something that was already gaining in scrutiny has really become something that employees now are expecting and demanding of their employers. Employers have to take a public stand. They have to do things internally to adjust the lack of opportunity for diverse and underrepresented populations, and even in the community. So this means considering setting high targets. Companies such as Nordstrom and Starbucks have done this. I think having to be really honest about where both CEOs as the individual leaders and the company has shortfalling, so they can really address the opportunity head on, and frankly ensure that the managers, the supervisors, the people who are touching the day-to-day lives of your employees are truly great leaders, great managers. They understand what it means to create an inclusive work environment and how to ensure that they are mentoring and giving equal opportunities to everybody on their teams. The fourth trend is well-being. I think one of the silver linings coming out of COVID is that well-being, both the mental health revolution and the broader sense of physical well-being, this is now squarely in the domain of what employers should be caring about. We saw huge stress and anxiety coming out of what is now clinically being defined as a shared trauma under COVID. And employers were expected to set policies in a completely unprecedented way to take care of their employees' well-being, whether that was when to come back to the office, vaccination policies, a very different way of interacting with their workforce. And that trend we're just seeing continuing both younger generations expecting to want to work at companies that care for the whole person, but also the kind of benefits that companies are now expected to provide. The final shift, the fifth trend that we see, is what I like to call okay boomer. It's really the generational shift that we see happening. That we've had a lot of anecdotal talk about how younger generations aren't as committed, they're more flaky. But honestly, if we look at the hard data, two major things emerge, particularly for Gen Z. And by the way, Gen Z is going to be 30% of your workforce by the end of this decade. So this is an important thing to get ahead of. The two things are, first, workplace demands, and second, the way they consume media, which has huge implications for learning. So let's think about workplace demands. Overall, Gen Z is highly focused on flexibility, both in schedule and location. I mean, a lot of this generation was finishing their studies during COVID, entering the workforce during these very flexible locations, and that's something they really value, alongside expecting a workplace that really focuses on values, on DEI, on ethics. 50% of Generation Z will make career decisions based on the employer's values and ethics. Okay, so the second aspect of media consumption. This is the first generation that has never known a world without the internet. And they grew up with digital devices in the palm of their hand. So just think about that. They spend 10 hours a week on average on TikTok, 7 hours on YouTube, 3 hours on Netflix. I can keep going. TikTok is the number one use that they spend their time on, and Snapchat is the number one social media site. So this bite-size type consumption, the shorter attention span, is a very big deal. They also prefer this asynchronous environment for learning. The social learning component's a really big focus area for them, partly because they have grown up with much less distinction between online and physical relationships, so they can get that deep connection and value through digital access to the social learning. And what this means is they expect digital learning to be personalized. This now enables a personalized learning experience. So this is a really different way of thinking about how this generation consumes content and how that translates to learning. This is not an incremental change to the way we have been doing learning over time in the workplace. This is a radical rethinking of employee learning. This has to be asynchronous first learning that delivers personalized journeys, video first, interactive, with opportunities for social learning blended in. Bite-sized consumption that fits with these shorter attention spans of Gen Z. Whole person topics delivered through very diverse and representative experts, coaches, mentors, trainers, whoever's featured has to fit into this broader idea of inclusive learning. The overall expectations for this kind of new learning platform technology are so much higher as well. I mean, in recent years, the advances with things like Peloton or the gaming platforms, this is the new standard which we should be judging learning technologies by for this new generation. So just to recap, the 5 trends that we see really defining the future of work. Number 1, the hybrid and remote workplaces. Number 2, this continued issue with retention and higher attrition from the workplace. Number 3, DEI being a C-level item, an agenda item. Number 4, the focus of well-being now being where the employer is expected to operate and help the employee. And finally, this huge generational shift with this okay boomer perspective, the Gen Z generation coming into being such a big part of the workplace. Thank you.